Hi, I'm Sally, otherwise known as Doula Sling Sally. I run Solent Parenting. I'm a birth and postnatal doula, sling consultant and breastfeeding supporter. I have 3 children, 12, 10 and 6, and I am also a committee member on the Informed Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond team.
The term perinatal usually refers to from pregnancy up till approximately the first year of baby's life. I think that's kind of what generally is accepted as what it covers, the kind of time span that it covers. So looking at it from that point of view, it's definitely not just about postnatal depression. I think PND is probably the thing that's most commonly mentioned, or that people will have definitely heard about. If they know anything about it, they'll have probably heard about postnatal depression. There are lots of other mental health issues that can arise in the postnatal period. There's PNA, postnatal anxiety, which is probably more common than postnatal depression, but less known, less discussed, maybe.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah. All of these mental health issues, that's the point, isn't it, really? Is it, how do you work out where's the line between just feeling low or being a little bit anxious about something because you're tired and hormonal and all the rest of it, or, you know, when do you know that you've crossed that line into actual depression or an actual medical state of anxiety or what have you. And these things aren't as clear cut as something like postnatal psychosis, which again is a postnatal condition, but tends to come on quite quickly and is very severe. And it, as Sinead always likes to say, it is what you would deem to be a mental health emergency. And it needs addressing quickly, and it will likely need addressing with a hospital stay. It's not just a case of plucking up the courage to go and see your GP. For mental health conditions in general, to a degree, in that you might not be recognizing, you might not be able to recognize that there's in yourself that you're not yourself, or that you are starting to behave out of character or unusually for you, or particularly low or anxious or what have you. It might be that your partner notices it first, or your mum, or your best friend, or somebody else who you've got around. Hopefully, when I first became ill, I didn't notice it. It wasn't me that realized there was something going on. I was a teacher at the time, and it was a good friend, somebody who'd been my mentor whilst I was training, who kind of took me aside one day and said, "You're really not yourself at the moment, and you haven't been for several weeks. Do you think it might be a good idea to go and see your GP?" And I don't think I initially knew what to say. I was a bit like, "What are you on about?
Yeah.
Don't be daft." And it took a couple of days to sink in, and her revisiting the subject with me, and saying all of those normal things. It's okay to be feeling not okay, whatever it is you're feeling, but you're really not yourself. And you should probably seek some support over that. And for me, my trigger was infertility. So although it wasn't, it doesn't quite fall under the title of perinatal mental health, it was, a related issue that started it off for me, which meant that when I did fall pregnant, I was still dealing with all of that. I'd been in and out of work for over a year, having been signed off for long periods of time, several times during that period. I was on medication. And I probably did what quite a lot of people do when they're already on medication and they find out they're pregnant. I went, I can't take that anymore, and just stopped taking it. And within about 48 hours, I was sat in the corner of my friend's classroom crying. Just wasn't going to work, particularly not cold turkey. So, back to the doctors and no, you must absolutely not. I'm not saying that this is definitely the medication that you'll stay on, but at the same time, they were like, you need to restart. I was very fortunate in the end that actually it was decided. Again, I think it's that chicken and egg situation, isn't it? There's not an awful lot known about the sorts of medication that are often prescribed for depression and other mental health conditions, and how they might affect a pregnant and or breast or chest feeding parent. So they're only working on a very small amount of information, possibly even anecdotal information. But it was decided that I had been relatively stable on this medication. So it was far better scenario to be on the medication and stable and, being carefully monitored and watched through my pregnancy than to try and stop. And then again, I thought that they would stop it or change it to something else postnatally, but they didn't. I remained on the same medication again. So I then went on to feed for a year whilst taking this same medication as well. So, you don't always need medication, but for me at that point in my life, the medication made a big difference.
Some people need medication, some people choose something else, but nobody needs just one thing. You might be on medication and that might be really, really helpful for you, but you also need a supportive environment. You need people you can talk to when you have stuff you need to talk about. You need a whole sort of holistic way of looking at your life.
I went to counselling as well initially in the first 6 to 12 months after being diagnosed, so to speak. I saw a counsellor as well, but again, it wasn't something I was recommended. CBT counselling, which isn't always available on the NHS. So I had to find and pay for my own private counsellor, who was very good. But again, it's one of those things where the kind of resources that should be available to us aren't always available. No. And it's not fair that I was a professional person at that point in my life. I was a teacher, so and even though I'd been off on sick leave, teachers are very fortunate in that they get quite a high level of paid sick leave. So I was still in, and this was prior to having children, so we didn't have that drain on our resources either. So I was in a position to be able to pay for my own counselling. But there are going to be lots of people out there who just aren't in that position and are going to be reliant on waiting to be referred by the GP to whatever it is.
So the other thing that's brilliant that we've got locally, especially if you find that you're starting to feel not really yourself, or struggling with stuff, or have a mental illness diagnosis, is, I think they're called the DAISY team, aren't they? So they're a specialist midwife team who
work alongside.
Yeah, they're there to work with your midwife and to support you with mental health stuff during pregnancy, particularly, and also immediately postnatal.
And not just things like postnatal depression or anxiety or any, those kinds of things. They also help. I believe they run a tocophobia clinic. They also support people who've had previous traumatic birth in preparation for planning for the next birth, or who have experienced baby loss. So their remit is quite wide, isn't it? It's quite all-encompassing, and they have a really good reputation, I think, locally. I don't know anybody who has been under their care and support and hasn't felt cared for and supported.
Yeah, they certainly seem really lovely.
I mean, obviously, mental well-being has a far greater profile than it's ever done before, which is brilliant. We're definitely moving in the right direction. But I also can't help but feel that still, as a nation, or Western modern society, there's very much still that attitude of stick a band-aid on it, ignore it, put your big girl pants on, all of those kinds of things. We're not very, perhaps it's a British thing, I don't know, we're not, we don't listen well enough. I was going to say we don't talk about these things, but maybe we don't talk about these things because people don't listen in the correct way. And that might sound a bit cack-handed, but there's a vast difference between, and as a lots of people will know that I'm a volunteer breastfeeding supporter. So one of the key skills that we focus on when we do that training is called active listening skills. So it's that ability to listen to somebody and to just hold the space for them. And again, you know this, Sarah, because it's part of our doula. It's part of what doulas do as well, isn't it? It's about holding the space for somebody and just sitting with them in their pain or whatever it is that they're struggling with, and just listening and letting them get it off their chest and let it all out. It's not about trying to fix it for them. It is just about listening and acknowledging that this is a really tough time. This thing that they're going through is really hard, and that's okay. And you can hate being a parent and still love your child all at the same time, and that's so confusing. Such a confusing feeling. And the same can be said for all members of the family. This isn't just about the mum or the birthing person. This is about the partner or the dad or whoever else is in that child's life. There's it's well known now that guys can suffer from postnatal depression as well as women. So if if dad is on the scene, or if you've got a male partner, they can absolutely go through postnatal depression in exactly the same way that the woman or the birthing person would or could be. And equally it affects other children in the family as well.
A major life transition, and it's okay to have big feelings about that. It's basically the thing.
Yeah. One of our points, you know, speaking as a doula, one of the big bonuses of having a postnatal doula is that you know, they have experience, a wealth of knowledge and experience, and you know, lived and read about and what have you. They're great at signposting to other services. They're great at holding that space and using those active listening skills to let you offload and just share to. And quite often it can be it can almost seem easier to have those conversations with a relative stranger, you know, or not necessarily a stranger, but just someone who's not your partner
or your mum.
not your mum, not your sister, you know,
someone who's not already got opinions about you in your life,
that's not got that same emotional attachment to you as a person, who can stand back and look at the bigger picture a little bit. You know, a bit in a similar way to me with my work colleague being the first person to kind of say to me, you know, you're not right.
I guess
in that perinatal period, you know, there's just hormones running wild and all sorts of new, weird and wonderful things that you're going through physically and emotionally. So to have that person or that method of supporting yourself is really beneficial. I mean, there are lots of self-help things that you can do for your own well-being, not necessarily talking about those who do have a mental health diagnosis, a mental illness diagnosis. That, you know, these sorts of things that I'm about to talk about are sometimes relevant for some of those people, but not always. So, you know, things like journaling or craft activities, things that take you away from, you know, that you can escape into, I guess is the point. Journaling's a great one because it can feel really cathartic, and to write. I mean, oftentimes people will say to me, but I don't know what to write about, you know, and you're overthinking it almost if you're worried about what you're going to write about.
I think the point of journaling being to sort of empty your brain of all the things that are going around it, rather than create a beautiful diary that you can publish in future.
It's more the action of just putting pen to paper and starting. Even if you just start off writing out the alphabet, I'm sure it would it will very quickly change, and that process of just emptying your brain out onto the page, and then whether you keep that or whether you rip it up or whether you burn it, or, you know, that's completely up to you. But lots and lots of people find that process of journaling, just emptying your brain out onto the page, very cathartic and very soothing. I know lots of people who swear by doing that sort of activity before going to bed in order to try and help their brain turn off and be able to actually rest and fall asleep more easily. And then of course we've got things like yoga and meditation and mindfulness, and of course there's 1,000,001 apps and things out there now that for different mindfulness exercises and things. You can go on YouTube and listen to a guided meditation or a guided relaxation, a script, or I can't think for the life of me what it's called, but there's another one where it's all calming lights and twinkly sounds, and so it is a video.
We have Spotify, and on there's loads of podcasts that are just relaxation tracks or mindfulness tracks, and you can find things that are there to help you sleep or feel a particular way about something.
I recently got into yoga nidra during lockdown, and I found that really beneficial because that is really deep relaxation, and it does clear your mind and helps you refocus, and it can help you bring a little bit more positivity back into the everyday. affirmations again, you know, lots of these things we would use or we might have heard of during our pregnancy anyway, in preparing ourselves for labour and birth, and they're just as valid postnatally and kind of any day of the week really as a tool to help us with our mental well-being.
Yeah. So, you know, going for a run if you're into running, or going for a walk in the woods if you're not really into running. Going out in nature is a whole nother layer of thing that can just change the way that you're thinking and just sort of give you a bit of a, I
think forest bathing is just starting to become known about in this country now, isn't it? And being out in nature, and if you've already got children, being out in nature can be an absolute godsend, you know, because the kids are happy, they can run wild, run free, everybody gets to breathe deeply and just kind of relax and be who they are and not have to worry about anything else really. Yes, there's other alternative therapies, if that's the right phrase, so homeopathy, neuropathy, the use of essential oils, acupuncture, all of those things are said to have benefits. Medicinal herbs, you know, I think the key with all of those things is do your research and find somebody who really knows their stuff.
Yeah.
You know, don't just go by what your best friend tells you because it worked for her. And equally, particularly if you're pregnant and or breastfeeding, chest feeding, you know, you really need to make sure that you're not going to take anything that's going to cause an issue.
Yeah.
Then there are the wonders of your placenta as well. So if you are pregnant and concerned about the possibility of postnatal depression, then you might want to look into having your placenta encapsulated or consuming your placenta in some way, shape or form.
Sometimes I guess we see self-care and things like that referred to, and it can become sort of another thing on your list of I must do these things in order to be doing everything right. And actually the most important part of self-care, especially for your mental health, is to not be trying to do everything right. In fact, like the expectations that we have of ourselves that we see in society of how we're supposed to be some kind of super people who can do everything and don't need any support with anything, and actually that's really, really bad for your mental health to try and just do everything and be fine and good all the time, or be the perfect parent or the perfect person at doing correct mental health things or whatever.
But
actually some days if everybody is fed and I was going to say clean, but you know, clean isn't even that important all the time.
We had a phrase when ours were very small, and it's a bit close to the bone, but you know, everybody fed, nobody dead, everything's all right.
It's all fine. This is one of those days.
That's talking about that other people's Instagram posts, you know, you don't know that person's life most probably does not look like, you know, they may have had to take 50 photographs to get the Instagram perfect photograph that's finally been shared with their many followers on social media. And there's it can feel like a lot of pressure to be doing or achieving or getting on with things, when actually, you know, that's not necessarily the case at all, you know. And we do understand now more, I think, about the mental load, particularly for whoever that person is that's in the primary carer role at home, you know, thinking about just the vastness of everything you have to do and process and get on with on an everyday basis. And that's a lot. And it's okay to get overwhelmed by that.
And it's okay to say, yes, you can do this, when people say, is there anything we can do to help? It's okay to have a list of things like, yeah, can you do the washing up, please? Or yeah, can you just run the Hoover over? Or yeah, can you just drop off some milk, please?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you're failing as a parent or that you're not smashing it as a person. It just means that you're normal.